They laughed at her before the first shot was fired. An 18-year-old girl, barely out of training, standing among the most feared special forces on the planet, the Navy SEALs. Her helmet looked too big. Her grip seemed unsure. Whispers echoed behind her back. She doesn't belong here. Then the mission began. Dust filled the air. Gunfire cracked through the ruined streets. Chaos swallowed the battlefield. And in the moment when everything went wrong, when trained soldiers hesitated, she pulled the trigger. One shot. Silence followed. What happened next would shock the SEALs, change the mission, and rewrite everything they thought they knew about courage, fear, and age. This is the true-style military story of how an underestimated teenager went from being mocked to being remembered. The desert morning was cold, the kind of cold that slipped through body armor and settled deep into bones. A pale sun rose over the ruined outskirts of the city, casting long shadows across shattered concrete and burned vehicles. Dust floated endlessly in the air, carried by a wind that never seemed to rest. This was not a place meant for young people. It was not a place meant for doubt. Yet she stood there, 18 years old. Her boots touched the ground as she stepped off the armored transport, the metal ramp clanging softly behind her. Around her, the Navy SEALs moved with mechanical precision, men hardened by years of combat, their movements efficient, silent, almost instinctive. Their gear bore scratches and scars, proof of missions survived and battles endured. To them, this was another operation. To her, it was the moment everything changed. She adjusted the strap of her helmet, the weight of it pressing down on her neck. It felt heavier than it should have, not because of its size, but because of what it represented. Responsibility, expectation, judgment. Every step she took felt watched. She was introduced with a single word: attachment. Not a core member of the unit, not a decision-maker, just additional manpower assigned to observe, assist, and stay out of the way unless told otherwise. The label hung in the air like a quiet insult. The SEALs noticed her immediately. Some glanced briefly and looked away. Others stared longer, their expressions unreadable behind dark glasses and dust-streaked faces. A few exchanged looks that needed no words. Too young, too small, too inexperienced. One operator leaned toward another and muttered, "Is this a joke?" Another smirked. She even fired a round outside training. She heard them. She pretended not to. Her face remained still, calm, almost emotionless, but inside her chest, her heart hammered against her ribs. Fear crept in, not the kind that freezes the body, but the sharp kind that forces awareness. She had learned early that fear wasn't something to eliminate. It was something to control. She had trained for this moment for years. While others partied, she ran drills. While others slept, she studied tactics. She knew every rule of engagement by memory. She knew her weapon as if it were an extension of her own hands. She knew she was ready, even if no one else believed it. The mission briefing began inside a makeshift command tent. Maps were spread across a folding table, corners weighed down by ammunition magazines. The commander's voice was steady, experienced, carrying authority earned through decades of service. High-value hostile presence, urban combat environment, civilians in the area. No room for mistakes. She listened carefully, memorizing routes, danger zones, fallback positions. Every detail mattered. Every detail could mean life or death. When the briefing ended, the team moved out. She was placed in the middle of the formation, protected position. The unspoken message was clear: don't let the kid get hurt. They advanced through narrow streets, lined with crumbling buildings. Windows were dark, broken, watching silently. The city felt alive in the wrong way, as if it were holding its breath. Her rifle was steady in her hands, her breathing slow, her senses sharp. She noticed things others ignored. A curtain shifting slightly, a footprint in the dust that didn't belong, the faint metallic smell of spent gunpowder lingering in the air. These were small details, easily dismissed, but she cataloged them all. A SEAL glanced back at her again. "You keeping up?" he asked, his tone neutral but his eyes skeptical. "Yes, sir," she replied. Short, controlled, professional. He nodded once. Unconvinced, and turned forward. They moved deeper. The whispers continued over the radio. Watch the attachment. Don't let her lag. Last thing we need is dead weight. Each word hit harder than incoming fire ever could. But she stayed silent. She knew something they didn't. That being underestimated had become her strength. People showed their true intentions when they thought you weren't a threat. They made mistakes. They overlooked details. She would not. The first distant gunshot echoed through the city, sharp and sudden. The team halted instantly, weapons raised, scanning rooftops and alleyways. Her body reacted before her thoughts did, training taking control. This was real now. No instructors. No simulations. No second chances. As they resumed movement, her pulse quickened, not from panic, but from focus. Every step brought them closer to contact. Every breath felt heavier. She could feel their doubt pressing down on her from all sides. But beneath that pressure was something stronger. Resolve. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to survive. And she didn't yet know it, but before this mission ended, every man who doubted her would remember her name, even if they never spoke it aloud. The city grew tighter as they moved forward, the streets narrowing into winding corridors of broken stone and rusted metal. Every step echoed just a little too loudly. Every shadow seemed a little too long. This was the kind of terrain where hesitation killed and confidence was tested with blood. She stayed in formation, her boots landing exactly where the man ahead of her stepped. The weight of her gear no longer felt unfamiliar. It was part of her now, like a second skin. But the weight of doubt around her pressed harder than the armor on her chest. The seals spoke less as they advanced, but when they did, their words carried edges. Keep spacing tight, one of them said over the radio. Eyes up, another responded. Then, quieter, but not quiet enough. Watch the attachment. She heard again. The word followed her like a shadow. Attachment, as if she were equipment, as if she were temporary, replaceable. She focused on the rhythm of movement instead. Step, scan, breathe, check corners. The basics drilled into her until they lived in her muscles. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. This was about staying alive. A sudden clatter echoed from an alley to their left. The team froze instantly. Weapons snapped into position. Fingers hovered just off triggers. The world shrank to the sound of breathing inside helmets and the faint hum of radios. A stray dog bolted from the shadows, ribs showing, eyes wild with fear. A few seals exhaled. One laughed quietly. Cities got more dogs than people. She didn't laugh. She had noticed something else. Scratches on the wall near the alley, fresh and uneven. Someone had passed through recently. Maybe minutes ago. She raised her hand slightly, signaling caution. No one noticed. They moved on. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had been told to observe, not lead. Still, she memorized the location, marking it in her mind. They reached a partially collapsed building that intelligence had flagged as a possible hostile hideout. The structure leaned like it was tired of standing, its windows dark, its entrance blocked by rubble. The team split into two elements. She was assigned to the rear of the second group. Again, a safe position. Again, protected. The message was consistent. Stay alive. Stay quiet. Stay out of the way. Inside the building, the air was stale and heavy with dust. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, creating thin beams that cut through the darkness. Every footstep sent small avalanches of debris down broken staircases. She felt sweat trickle down her spine. Her senses sharpened further. A seal in front of her paused, listening. She did the same. That's when she heard it, a soft scrape above them, barely audible, easy to dismiss. Her heart rate spiked. She keyed her radio. Possible movement above second floor. Silence. Then a voice crackled back, irritated. Negative. Thermal's clean. She swallowed and released the radio button. Thermal wasn't everything. She knew that. She had been taught that equipment failed, batteries died, readings lied. But she was just the attachment. They continued upward. The scrape came again, clearer this time. She tightened her grip on her rifle. The team reached the second floor, sweeping rooms one by one. Empty, abandoned, but not untouched. Dust disturbed, footprints overlapping. Someone had been there recently. Still, the skepticism remained thick in the air. One SEAL glanced at her. "You jumpy?" "No, sir," she replied calmly. He raised an eyebrow and turned away. Her chest burned, not from anger but from restraint. She knew when to speak, and she knew when to wait. They exited the building and regrouped outside. The commander consulted his map, frowning. Intelligence suggested heavier presence in the area than they'd encountered so far. Something was off. The radio crackled again. Distant gunfire. Not aimed at them, but close enough to matter. Civilians ran down the street ahead, shouting in a language she didn't understand. Panic rippled through the area like electricity. This was how it started. Chaos created cover. She scanned the rooftops automatically, eyes moving from ledge to ledge. That's when she noticed a glint, metal catching sunlight for just a second before disappearing. Her pulse jumped. She raised her weapon slightly, tracking the position. A SEAL noticed and followed her gaze. "What is it?" "Possible contact," she said. "Rooftop 3 buildings ahead." He squinted. "You sure?" "Yes." He hesitated. That hesitation, just half a second, told her everything. He didn't fully trust her. Yet, the commander's voice came over the radio. "All units, maintain alert posture. We're moving." They advanced again, tension rising with every step. She could feel it now. Something was coming. The city had gone too quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. As they turned onto a wider street, her instinct screamed. This was the kill zone. Her breathing slowed. Her grip tightened. And though she didn't know exactly how or when, she understood one undeniable truth. The moment was approaching when doubt would no longer matter. Because soon, action would speak louder than every whispered word. The silence broke without warning. One moment the street lay open and empty, sunlight reflecting off shattered glass and rusted vehicles. The next, the world tore itself apart. The explosion came from the front of the column, sharp, violent, and deafening. Concrete shattered. Metal screamed. A shockwave ripped through the air and slammed into their bodies, throwing dust and debris in every direction. The ground buckled beneath her boots, and she was thrown hard against a cracked wall. Her ears rang. For a split second, everything disappeared into white noise and smoke. Then training took over. "Contact front," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted instantly, echoing between buildings like thunder trapped in stone. Bullets snapped overhead, chewing into walls, vehicles, and anything else unlucky enough to be in their path. The city that had seemed abandoned seconds ago came alive with deadly intent. She dropped low, pressing herself behind a burned-out car, heart hammering but mind clear. Dust coated her face and gear. She blinked hard, forcing her vision to focus through the chaos. This was it. No more whispers. No more doubt. Just survival. The SEALs moved with brutal efficiency, returning fire, calling out positions, shifting angles. Orders overlapped on the radio. Urgent, clipped, controlled. 2 o'clock. RPG left side. Move. Move. She scanned constantly, her rifle tracking her vision. Windows. Rooftops. Alley mouths. Every opening was a threat. Civilians screamed somewhere nearby, running blindly for cover. She forced herself not to look. Hesitation here meant death, for her or someone else. A round slammed into the hood of the car inches from her head, showering her with sparks. She flinched once, then steadied. Breathe. Focus. Find the source. She spotted muzzle flashes from a third-floor window across the street. The flashes came in bursts, disciplined, trained. This wasn't a random militia. This was organized. She keyed her radio. Enemy fire, 3rd floor, northeast building. Copy. Came the response, short, urgent. She shifted position, crawling to a better angle. Her movements were precise, deliberate. No wasted motion. She remembered the instructors who had shouted at her until her muscles burned, telling her that panic was contagious. That calm saved lives. A SEAL rolled beside her, firing controlled bursts. "You okay?" he yelled. She nodded, eyes never leaving the window. They're coordinated. He glanced at her, surprised, not by fear at her voice, but by the absence of it. The enemy adjusted tactics quickly. Fire shifted from windows to rooftops. Bullets rained down at steep angles now, forcing the team to hug cover tighter. "Sniper positions above," someone shouted. Her pulse spiked. This was the scenario she had feared and trained for the most. Rooftop threats were harder to see, harder to hit, and deadlier by far. She tilted her head, listening through the gunfire. The crack of shots told her distance, direction, elevation. She focused on the sound more than the sight. Then she saw it. A shadow moved behind a low rooftop wall, 3 buildings ahead. Slow, careful, a shape that didn't belong. Her breath caught. She tracked the movement with her rifle, finger resting just before the trigger. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her hands were steady. She keyed the radio again. Possible sniper rooftop, 3 buildings front, slightly right. Static. Say again, someone responded. Before she could repeat herself, a shot rang out, closer this time. A SEAL beside her jerked back, cursing as the round grazed his shoulder. That was enough. "Contact high," the commander barked. The team shifted fire upward, but the shooter was already repositioning. She saw it. She saw everything. The angle, the distance, the timing. Her training screamed one thing, now. But she hesitated, not because she wasn't sure, because she knew what firing meant. It meant stepping beyond her role. It meant making a decision without permission. It meant taking responsibility for the consequences. Another shot cracked through the air, smashing into the wall inches above her head. That decided it. She rose just enough from behind cover, bracing her rifle against the car's frame. Her world narrowed to a single point on the rooftop. She exhaled slowly. Then, a nearby explosion rocked the street again, forcing her down as debris cascaded around her. The enemy was escalating. The team was pinned. They needed the rooftop threat neutralized. She crawled to a new position, ignoring the shouts behind her. "Stay down. Attachment, get back." She didn't. She found the angle again. The shadow appeared, just for a second. That second was enough. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and the street seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed in a way she had never experienced before. The chaos of the street faded into a distant echo, as if the world had pulled away from itself. Gunfire still cracked around her. Explosions still shook the ground. But inside her helmet, there was only silence and breath. One slow inhale, one steady exhale. Her eyes stayed locked on the rooftop. The shadow moved again, just inches this time. A head barely visible above the broken concrete barrier. A rifle barrel glinting faintly in the sunlight. Whoever was up there knew exactly what they were doing. They had already wounded one operator and were waiting for the next opening. She adjusted her stance, pressing the rifle tighter into her shoulder. The metal felt cold, familiar, grounding. Her finger rested against the trigger, not pulling, not rushing. She remembered the voice of her instructor from training, sharp and unforgiving. "Don't fire when you're scared. Fire when you're ready." Another shot rang out from the rooftop. The round slammed into the street, sending shards of asphalt into the air. A SEAL ducked just in time. That was it. She rose slightly from behind cover, just enough to see, not enough to expose herself fully. The world narrowed until there was nothing left but the sight picture. Front post. Target. Breath. She squeezed. The recoil was sharp but controlled. The sound of her shot cut through the chaos like a blade. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. Then the shadow collapsed. The figure on the rooftop jerked backward and disappeared from view, the rifle clattering against concrete as it fell. No return fire followed. No movement. Just stillness where death had been seconds before. Silence hit that part of the battlefield like a wave. It wasn't complete silence. Gunfire still echoed elsewhere, but the rooftop threat was gone. The pressure lifted instantly, like a weight removed from the team's chest. A SEAL stared at the rooftop, disbelief clear even behind his gear. Did you see that?" someone said over the radio. She stayed behind cover, heart pounding now, the delayed rush of adrenaline crashing into her system. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced them still. She didn't celebrate. She didn't speak. She just checked her surroundings again. The commander's voice came through, sharp and focused. Rooftop threat neutralized. Good shot. Identify shooter. There was a pause. Then a voice, hesitant, almost stunned. It was the attachment. The radio went quiet for half a second. Then movement erupted. Push forward. Advance, advance. Cover left. With the sniper down, the team surged ahead. The enemy fire faltered, losing coordination without their overwatch. SEALs moved aggressively now, clearing positions that had pinned them moments earlier. She rose and moved with them, no longer held back. No one told her to stay behind. No one questioned her position. They accepted it without words. As they advanced, she noticed subtle changes, glances thrown her way that held something new. Not doubt, not mockery, respect. The firefight continued for several intense minutes, but the balance had shifted. Without the rooftop shooter directing fire, the hostile fighters retreated, melting into alleys and side streets. One by one, the shots faded. The street fell quiet again, this time for real. Dust drifted lazily in the air. The smell of gunpowder and burned metal lingered. Her ears rang, the aftereffects of explosions and gunfire still echoing in her head. The team regrouped near a shattered storefront. A SEAL with a bandaged shoulder glanced at her. "That was you up there?" She nodded once. He let out a slow breath. "You saved my life." The words hit harder than the explosion had. She didn't know what to say. Another operator walked over, his expression serious. He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. Not exaggerated, not dramatic, genuine. The commander approached next. His face was calm, but his eyes studied her closely, evaluating, measuring. "You took the shot without being told," he said. "Yes, sir." "You understood the risk?" "Yes, sir." A pause. Then, "Good judgment." That was all, but it was everything. They resumed movement, clearing the rest of the area. She stayed closer to the front now, scanning, alert, fully part of the team. No one used the word attachment again. As they moved out of the kill zone, she felt the adrenaline begin to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and a strange clarity. Her body shook slightly, the reality of what she had done settling in. She had fired a live round in combat. She had taken a life. She pushed the thought aside. There would be time later to process it. Right now, the mission wasn't over. But something had changed permanently, not just in how the team saw her, in how she saw herself. She had crossed a line, from trainee to warrior, from observer to protector. And deep down, she knew this moment would follow her for the rest of her life. Because on that street, under fire, when everything mattered, she didn't hesitate. The street no longer echoed with gunfire, but it wasn't peaceful either. Silence settled unevenly, broken by distant sirens, the soft crackle of radios, and the sound of boots shifting against rubble. Smoke hung in the air like a stubborn ghost, refusing to leave. Dust coated everything. Faces, weapons, thoughts. She stood near the shattered storefront, rifle held low but ready, eyes still scanning instinctively. Her body hadn't caught up with her mind yet. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins in uneven waves, making her hands feel both light and heavy at the same time. This was the moment after. The part no one trained you for. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area, checking corners, clearing rooms one last time. They spoke in short, precise commands, but their tone had shifted. The edge of tension had softened into something quieter. Assessment, recalibration. She noticed how they moved around her now. No one steered her away. No one shielded her. No one told her where to stand. She was trusted to know. A senior operator crouched beside the fallen rooftop rifle that had clattered down during the fight. He examined it briefly, then looked back up at her. "That was a clean shot," he said, almost casually. She nodded, unsure how to respond. Praise felt foreign here, out of place. The commander gathered the team near a partially intact wall. He spoke in a low voice, but it carried authority. "We're adjusting formation," he said. Threat profiles changed. We moved tighter. No one questioned it. She took her place naturally among them, neither front nor rear, just part of the line. As they moved again, the city felt different. Not safer, just quieter, like a predator that had retreated into the shadows to wait. Her breathing slowed as her body began to come down from the high. The shaking in her hands faded, replaced by a deep, dull fatigue. Every muscle felt heavy, but her focus remained sharp. A seal walked beside her, the same one who had earlier asked if she was jumpy. He glanced over, then forward again. "Didn't expect that," he said. "Neither did I," she replied honestly. He gave a short, almost embarrassed laugh. "Guess we were wrong." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. They reached a temporary rally point, a small courtyard surrounded by crumbling walls. The team paused to check gear, reload magazines, and tend to minor injuries. The seal with the bandaged shoulder sat down heavily against a wall. She approached, kneeling beside him. "You good?" she asked. He nodded. "Would have been worse if you hadn't taken that shot." He met her eyes. There was no exaggeration in his voice, just truth. "Thank you," he added quietly. The word stayed with her. As they waited, the sounds of the city slowly returned. A distant engine, a door slamming, a child crying somewhere far away. Life continuing around the aftermath of violence. She leaned back against the wall, helmet resting against stone. For the first time since the mission began, her thoughts drifted inward. The shot replayed in her mind, not in flashes but in slow detail. The sight picture, the squeeze, the recoil, the sudden absence of movement. She wondered who the person on the rooftop had been. How old? How long they had been fighting? Whether they had doubted themselves too. She pushed the questions away. This was not the time. The commander approached her again, kneeling to her level. "You held your composure under pressure," he said. "That matters." "Yes, sir. You understand this changes expectations." She did. "I'll place you where you're most effective," he continued. "That means more responsibility." She nodded. Responsibility didn't scare her. It grounded her. They moved out again shortly after, navigating back streets and narrow paths as they repositioned. The team's rhythm felt smoother now, more unified. Communication flowed naturally. She was included in hand signals, in whispered updates, in shared awareness. At one point, she spotted movement in a window ahead and raised her hand. The team halted instantly. No hesitation. The window turned out to be empty. Wind. Curtains. No one criticized her. No one rolled their eyes. They moved on. As the sun climbed higher, the heat intensified, mixing with exhaustion to dull the sharp edges of thought. Sweat soaked her uniform. Her legs burned, but she kept pace. Near the edge of their operational zone, the team paused again. This time, it felt final. The commander gave the order to extract. Relief washed through her. Not joy, not celebration, just the knowledge that they had survived. As they walked toward the extraction point, one of the SEALs fell in his step beside her. "Most people freeze their first time," he said. "You didn't." She considered that. "I was scared." He nodded. "Yeah, so were we." The transport vehicles came into view, silhouettes against the dust and sunlight. Engines idled, waiting. She climbed aboard and sat silently, rifle resting across her knees. As the vehicle pulled away, the city receded behind them, its broken streets shrinking into the distance. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now. She wasn't sure what she had expected to feel after everything, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never be underestimated again. The transport vehicle rumbled forward, its heavy tires crushing gravel and debris as it carried them away from the city. The vibration traveled up through the metal floor and into her bones, steady and relentless. Inside, no one spoke. The silence felt different from the one before the ambush. This silence was earned. She sat along the side bench, her back against cold steel, rifle resting across her knees. Her helmet stayed on, chin strap fastened, even though the immediate danger had passed. It felt wrong to remove it, like letting go too soon. Around her, the SEALs did the same. Some leaned forward with elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Others rested their heads back against the walls, eyes closed but not sleeping. Combat didn't let you sleep right away. Your body hadn't gotten the message yet. The smell inside the vehicle was a mix of oil, dust, sweat, and burned gunpowder. It clung to everything. It would cling to her for days. She watched the city disappear through the narrow opening at the rear. Buildings blurring together, streets folding into distance. The place where the shot had been fired was already out of sight, but it remained sharp in her mind. Her breathing finally slowed enough for her to notice it. In, out, controlled. Her hands rested loosely on the rifle now. They no longer trembled. That scared her a little more than the shaking had. Across from her, the SEAL with the bandaged shoulder caught her glance. He gave a small nod, not formal, not exaggerated, just acknowledgement. She returned it. No words were needed. Someone passed a canteen down the line. When it reached her, she took a long drink. The water tasted faintly of metal and dust, but it grounded her, brought her fully back into her body. The commander stood near the front of the vehicle, one hand gripping an overhead rail to keep balance. He didn't speak, but his eyes moved constantly, checking each face, counting, making sure everyone was there. When his gaze met hers, he paused for half a second. Then he nodded. That nod carried more weight than any speech could have. As the vehicle continued, the adrenaline fully drained from her system. Exhaustion hit hard and fast like a wall. Her muscles ached deeply now. Her shoulders felt bruised beneath the armor. Her jaw tightened as she realized how hard she had been clenching it. She closed her eyes briefly. The images came immediately. The rooftop, the shadow, the squeeze, the fall. She opened her eyes again just as quickly, forcing herself to stay present. She had been warned about this, about the way the mind replayed moments when the body finally felt safe. One of the SEALs across from her noticed. "Don't let it loop," he said quietly. She looked at him. "First time always tries to loop," he added. You gotta interrupt it." "How?" she asked. He shrugged. "Focus on something real. Something here." She looked down at her boots. Scuffed now. Dust-stained. No longer new. That helped. The vehicle slowed as they approached the forward operating base. Armed guards waved them through the gate. Concrete barriers and watchtowers replaced broken buildings and alleyways. They were back. The ramp dropped with a heavy clang, sunlight flooding the interior. One by one, they stepped down, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting gear. The base felt almost unreal. Too clean, too organized, too normal. She stepped on a solid ground and felt a strange disconnect. Part of her was still in the city, still behind that burned-out car. The commander gathered them briefly. "Good work," he said. "We got in, we got out, and we did what we had to do." He paused. "Medical will check injuries. Then stand down." That was it. No speeches. No congratulations. That wasn't how this world worked. As the team dispersed, one of the younger SEALs walked up to her, hesitating slightly. "Hey," he said. "What you did back there, that took guts." She nodded. "It took training." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, that too." She headed toward the armory to clear her weapon. The familiar routine felt grounding. Magazine out, chamber clear, safety on. Simple actions. Normal actions. Her hands moved automatically. Once finished, she stepped outside and sat on a low concrete barrier. The sun was higher now, warming her face. She removed her helmet for the first time since the mission began and rested it beside her. Her hair was damp with sweat. Her head felt lighter and strangely exposed. She stared out at the open space beyond the base. She thought about the girl she had been that morning, stepping off the transport with clean boots and quiet determination. That girl still existed, but she had changed. Not hardened, sharpened. The commander approached and stopped a few feet away. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "Thank you, sir. You'll be brief later," he continued. "There will be questions. Reports." She nodded. She expected that. Then he added, "You earned your place." He turned and walked away. She sat there for a long time after that, listening to the sounds of the base, feeling the sun, breathing. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply existed in the quiet aftermath of survival. And deep inside, she understood something that couldn't be explained to anyone who hadn't been there. The ride back wasn't the end of the mission. It was the beginning of who she was becoming. The base returned to its usual rhythm by evening. Generators hummed. Radios crackled. Boots moved across concrete with purpose. From the outside, it looked like just another day ending after another mission. But inside the compound, something subtle had shifted, something invisible but undeniable. Stories had started to move. Not loudly, not officially. No reports yet, no commendations, no paperwork stamped and signed. Just quiet words exchanged between soldiers who trusted each other's judgment more than any written record. She took the shot. She didn't wait. That rooftop would have wiped us. The words traveled from one corner of the base to another, passed between cleaning rifles and refilling canteens, spoken low and with respect. No one exaggerated. No one dramatized. They didn't need to. Truth carried enough weight on its own. She felt it before anyone said anything directly to her. The way conversations paused when she passed. The way eyes followed, not with suspicion but recognition. The way her presence no longer felt temporary. She went through the evening routine quietly, ate without much appetite, cleaned her gear methodically, wrote brief notes for the after-action review, sticking strictly to facts. Time, position, observation, action, no emotions. That would come later. As night settled in, the base lights cast long shadows across the concrete. The air cooled, carrying the smell of fuel and dust. She sat alone on a bench near the edge of the compound, helmet beside her, staring out into the darkness beyond the perimeter fence. That was when footsteps approached. She looked up to see two SEALs, senior operators by the way they moved. Calm, confident, no wasted energy. Mind if we sit? One asked. Go ahead, she said. They sat on either side of her, both facing forward. For a moment, none of them spoke. Finally, one of them broke the silence. You ever work urban overwatch before? Yes, she replied. Training rotations. Live fire simulations. He nodded. You read the rooftop fast. She shrugged slightly. It was the pattern. The other SEAL glanced at her, curious. Most people don't see patterns under that kind of pressure. She didn't answer right away. I had to, she said finally. No one else was looking up. That earned a quiet chuckle. Fair enough, the first one said. They sat there a bit longer, the conversation drifting to neutral topics, weather, rotations, upcoming assignments. Nothing about the kill. Nothing about fear. That wasn't avoidance. That was respect for boundaries. Before they stood to leave, one of them said something that stayed with her. Next time, you won't be an attachment. They walked away without waiting for a response. Later that night, alone in her bunk, the quiet pressed in harder than the firefight ever had. The base slept around her, but her mind refused to follow. The loop tried again. The shot. The fall. The stillness after. She breathed slowly, grounding herself the way she'd been taught. She focused on the weight of the blanket, the solid feel of the bunk beneath her, the distant hum of generators. It worked mostly. She understood now why veterans spoke so carefully about firsts. First combat. First shot. First life taken. They stayed with you. Not as nightmares always. Sometimes as lessons. Morning came early. She woke before the alarm, dressed quickly, and stepped outside into the cool dawn. The base was quieter at that hour, the world washed in pale light. She ran, not because she was ordered to, because movement helped. Each step burned away the residue of thought. Each breath felt earned. As she slowed near the end of her run, she noticed a small group of soldiers training nearby. One of them struggled with a drill, repeating the same mistake. She almost walked past. Then she stopped. She corrected the stance, adjusted the grip, explained the angle. The soldier nodded, grateful. Thanks, he said. Didn't know you were that experienced. She paused. Neither did they. By midday, the after-action briefings began. Officers spoke. Notes were taken. Timelines were reviewed. Her name came up. Not dramatically, not loudly, but clearly. The commander didn't embellish. Rooftop threat neutralized by independent action, he said. Correct judgment under pressure. No one questioned it. No one challenged it. That was when it became official. Not on paper, but in reality. She belonged. Not because she was young. Not because she was different. but because when the moment demanded action, she had delivered. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the base in orange and gold, she stood at the perimeter fence again. Beyond it lay the same world as before, dangerous, unpredictable, unforgiving. But she wasn't the same. She had arrived underestimated. She had left the battlefield changed. And now, without announcements or applause, without ceremony or titles, she had crossed into something deeper than rank or role. She had become someone others would trust their lives to. And that, more than any medal, was the real legacy of that shot. Time moved forward as it always did. The base rotated teams. New missions replaced old ones. New faces arrived. Others left quietly under the cover of routine orders. On the surface, everything returned to normal. But some moments didn't fade with time. They settled in deeper, becoming reference points. The shot became one of those moments. Not something spoken about openly. Not something bragged about. It existed instead in the way people adjusted when she entered a room, in the way her opinions were no longer questioned, in the subtle shift of responsibility placed on her shoulders. She noticed it most during training exercises, where once instructors corrected her closely, now they watched from a distance. Where once she followed, now she was placed where decisions mattered. No announcement marked the change. It simply happened. One afternoon, during an urban simulation drill, a young soldier froze mid-movement, overwhelmed by noise and pressure. The instructors were seconds from intervening when she stepped in. "Breathe," she said calmly. "Find one thing you can control." The soldier followed her voice, steadied, moved again. Later, one of the instructors approached her. "You didn't rush him." "I know what rushing feels like," she replied. That was the difference now. She understood fear, not as weakness, but as information. At night, when the base lights dimmed and the world quieted, the memory still visited her. Not violently, not every night, just enough to remind her that the line she crossed could never be uncrossed. She accepted that. Acceptance didn't mean comfort. It meant honesty. She wrote a letter once, not to anyone else, but to herself. She didn't keep it. She didn't reread it. She burned it afterward. But writing it allowed her to place the memory somewhere outside her body, even if only briefly. Weeks later, a briefing came down. New mission, new environment, higher stakes. This time, there was no mention of attachment. She was listed as part of the operational element. On the day of departure, she stood at the transport again, boots now worn, gear marked by use. She felt different stepping aboard. Not heavier, not harder, but clearer. One of the SEALs from the first mission stood nearby, adjusting his gloves. "Funny how things change," he said. She nodded. "Funny how fast." He looked at her seriously. "You ready?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I know what it costs." He smiled slightly. "That's the right answer." The mission itself wasn't easier. None ever were. But something fundamental had shifted in how she moved through danger. She trusted her instincts without rushing them. She spoke when it mattered. She acted when hesitation would have cost lives. Afterward, no one needed to tell her she had done well. She already knew. Years later, long after that city had faded from maps and memory, someone would ask her about the first time. The first shot, the first moment everything changed. She would pause before answering. "I didn't become brave that day," she would say. "I just stopped pretending fear meant I couldn't act." They would nod, not fully understanding. And that was okay, because some truths belonged only to those who had stood in that space between decision and consequence. The world would never know her name. There would be no headlines, no documentaries, no medals polished for display. But somewhere, men and women would return home alive because she had trusted herself in a moment when doubt was louder than gunfire. And that was enough. She arrived once as someone underestimated. She left that battlefield as someone remembered, not in stories told loudly, but in lives quietly continued. In the end, the legacy of that shot wasn't the life it took. It was the lives it saved.